Good evening, Robert Scribbler. It is September 9th, 2018. Thank you for joining me for another climate change and clean energy video blog. Now, for this segment, I am basically going to provide for you a video blog from my location in Garden City Beach, South Carolina, or Murrells Inlet. And this is usually my vacation. I am not a storm chaser, but apparently sometimes storms can tend to chase me a bit. Last year we were here, we got the outskirts of Irma and tropical storm intensity type conditions. We had a bit of overwash here behind me at this dune, but nothing too major, although it did shake this house a bit, and some of the family members who were with me were a bit disturbed. But what the East Coast right now, what the Southeast Coast right now is staring down the barrel of is the potential for an impact similar to or worse than that of Hurricane Hugo, which struck this same region in 1989. And this picture, which I am showing, is of the same area, the same street, in fact, that I am on right now, following Hugo's landfall 50 miles to the south. Now, it's currently projected that Florence is most likely to track to the north of here, and usually for hurricanes, the most damaging feature is the right front quadrant of the storm, and for the U.S. East Coast, that includes where the center hits landfall and regions to the north of that path. Depending on the size of the storm, it could be 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 150 miles to the north, where you tend to see the worst impacts. So what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about the present conditions for Florence. Now, Florence underwent some weakening over the past couple of days due to some wind shear and some dry air getting into the hurricane. But now the hurricane has entered an environment that is far more favorable for development. There is less wind shear. The dry air that was in the storm appears to be flushing out, and it is presently moving over ocean surface temperatures that are in the range of 29 degrees Celsius, which is very warm. I've been out in the ocean here surfing and swimming today, and I can tell you it feels like bath water. It reminds me a lot of my college days when I was at Flagler in St. Augustine, Florida, and when we'd stay over for the summertime and it get super crazy hot down there in Florida, and you go into the water and you'd swim around, and if you exerted yourself, you did not feel as if the water was cooling you off at all. And that's how warm the sea surface, the ocean feels at this time, and it's that kind of ocean environment that Florence is plowing into. Now, it looks like Florence, just from this satellite shot, is starting to undergo a period of rapid intensification, and the National Hurricane Center is going to be putting out its 11 o'clock briefing in about 8 minutes or so. And if you tune in to the National Hurricane Center, you can find out whether or not this satellite picture, which looks like a storm that is really starting to ramp up, is telling the true story. In my opinion, it looks like it is. I encourage you to check out the National Hurricane Center. As of the last update at 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, Florence was a Category 1 storm with maximum sustained winds of 85 miles an hour. But what was most concerning about this update from the National Hurricane Center was that it was showing Florence hitting a peak intensity of around 150 miles an hour as it is projected to track toward the U.S. East Coast. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the track later, and possibly landfall with a sustained maximum sustained wind intensity of 140 miles an hour, which would put it in the range of Hugo, possibly stronger than Hugo. In addition, a number of the rainfall models that we were looking at. Got some reports out from the Capital Weather Gang at the Washington Post, noting that rainfall potentials could be as high as 30 inches or more if the storm tracks inland. So not only a very dangerous situation for the U.S. East Coast where this hurricane strikes, but also a potential danger for severe inland flooding rains. So this could be a really bad 1-2 punch if this storm does develop along its projected intensity track, strike where the present model paths indicate that it will, and containing so much moisture interacting with a trough that has been persisting over the eastern U.S. to produce potentially very severe amounts of rain. So I'm going to show you the guidance, a lot of the present model guidance for Florence, and note that only 2 models here have Florence recurving out into the North Atlantic, with most of the model consensus now focusing in on the southern coast of North Carolina, about 70 to 120 miles north of where I am, near Wilmington. If this track does if this consensus is correct, we would expect the potential for a very powerful Florence to make landfall in North Carolina by late Thursday or sometime Friday. So a very disturbing trend for Florence. It's worth noting that Florence is moving over much warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, and these warmer than normal sea surface temperatures are enhanced by human-caused climate change, so it's getting a bit of a kick. In addition, Florence is moving through a very moist environment. It has been very moist over this section of the North Atlantic and over the eastern U.S. consistently throughout summer. And this moisture also can help to provide a lot of fuel for storms. The only real limiter for Florence would be atmospheric effects such as wind shear and possibly dry air being limited by the very moist environment. And presently, models showing very little wind shear in the present projected path of Florence. So very few limits on a hurricane that could be the worst hurricane to strike the U.S. East Coast in at least the past 30 years, possibly the past 50 years. So something to keep an eye on if you're on the Carolina coast. This is supposed to be my vacation, but here I am. Thank you for joining me. I'll be chatting with you soon.